Hello class, my name is Oscar Sun and I will be talking about diabetes, when sweets turn sour. I would first like to clarify that diabetes is not so much a disease as it is a human condition. Diabetes as a condition is used to describe people with hyperglycemia, or high blood sugar levels in blood. I'm sure many of us here know of someone who has or is currently battling diabetes. I currently have 6 family members who are suffering from this condition, with a few more including my own parents who are at risk for diabetes. Diabetes is quite easy to understand. As you know from previous lectures in class, most of the food we eat, such as carbohydrates, is broken down into glucose and various other sugar molecules. Sugars provide cells the fuel to create energy, and from the digestive system, sugars are absorbed into the bloodstream from the small intestine. There, it will transfer to cells with the help of insulin, a hormone produced by the pancreas. Hyperglycemia results when this process is impaired or lost, and this is the fundamental problem diabetes describes. Now, diabetes has 3 types. Type 1 diabetes is due to pancreatic beta cell loss. We'll discuss this in the next slide. Type 2 diabetes is due to growing insulin resistance. We are currently unsure of how this comes to be, but this is the cause for diabetes in older people. There's also a third type of diabetes called gestational diabetes, and this only occurs during pregnancy. We'll also be discussing all 3 of these on the following slides. Type 1 diabetes, as mentioned earlier, is caused by pancreatic beta cell loss. These beta cells regulate insulin production in the pancreas. An insufficient amount, or in many cases the lack of beta cells, raise blood sugar levels, leading to hyperglycemia. This usually occurs as a result of a faulty autoimmune system in which the body kills these beta cells on its own. This usually also occurs in youth. We will talk about treatment after introducing the 2 other types of diabetes. Type 2 diabetes finds its source from a developed insulin resistance. Insulin resistance, a disorder, is as its name implies. To produce insulin becomes less effective in providing cells the sugar molecules from the bloodstream. So the pancreas is stressed to produce more to keep the body efficient at removing sugars from the bloodstream. Over time, as the pancreas is stressed, its ability to produce insulin deteriorates and eventually loses the ability altogether. Treatment of type 2 is similar to type 1, but type 2 is much easier to manage, and we'll discuss this later in detail. Gestational diabetes, the third type of diabetes, is caused during pregnancy. A small amount of pregnancies, upwards to about 10%, experience this. The mothers develop a temporary insulin resistance during pregnancy, and as a response, the pancreas produces more insulin to compensate. In excess amounts, the sugars get stored in the developing baby as fat. And during development, this may be fine, but a heavy newborn may face other health issues as it develops down the road. There is no correlation of risk between gestational diabetes and the other types of diabetes. That is, whether you've had diabetes or not does not affect your chances of gestational diabetes, and having gestational diabetes does not mean you will develop type 2 diabetes later on. As diabetes is characterized by an internal factor, figuring out whether you have diabetes may be difficult. Some diabetics show no symptoms, while others experience all the symptoms. General symptoms of diabetes are abnormal hunger or thirst, but as you have to watch what you eat, this usually leads to extreme weight loss. And since having a meal, let alone a balanced meal, becomes incredibly difficult, fatigue sets in quite easily during the day. Excessive urination from your kidneys, due to them working harder to flush sugars from the blood, is also characteristic of a diabetic. and also a weakened immune system. So infections and illnesses set in quite easily, and scabs and other abrasions on skin is much difficult to heal. In extreme cases, diabetics also experience visual impairment, with very extreme cases leading to blindness. So preparing to lower your risk of diabetes is very important. Watching how much of what you eat and regular exercise are simple and effective ways of defending yourself from becoming a diabetic. Not surprisingly, these two habits are also treatment habits. Other treatment options are insulin introduction and medication taken orally. Insulin introduction usually takes the form of injections, with some type 1 diabetic cases requiring an insulin pump. As stated earlier, diet and regular exercise are important as well. Medication take the form of prescribed pills, and many people prefer them as they do not require a self-administered injection. These two treatment options are mutually exclusive, meaning they can be taken independently of each other. From this pie chart, adults show a preference of taking oral medication only over having insulin injections. This pie chart, of course, does not take into account the severity of each diabetic case, as more extreme hyperglycemia require insulin injections or other forms of introductions such as pumps. As noted earlier, diet and exercise are also important to include with insulin or medication treatments to treat diabetics in the long-term case. Now, as science and medical research continue to prosper, more treatment options will develop. Currently, and quite recently, incretin mimetics have entered the market thanks to the FDA as an injected treatment. Incretin mimetics mimics the hormone incretin that effectively tells the pancreas to produce more insulin. This is a more natural human process to battle hyperglycemia, as the body is not producing the insulin rather than yourself injecting foreign insulin into the body. The downside to this option is that it stresses the pancreas, as stated earlier with some of type 2 diabetic cases, that this leads to a deteriorating ability to produce insulin later on down the road. Sodium glucose cotransporter 2 inhibitors, or SGLT2 inhibitors, functions to effectively flush more sugar into the urine through the kidneys. The Food and Drug Administration had approved of this type of treatment as a medication about 3 months ago, and it is currently facing more testing to ensure its safety for humans. Perhaps, though, the most interesting treatment is the artificial pancreas. Currently, this is basically an automated insulin pump. Rather than manually injecting the insulin with the pump as you would with a traditional insulin pump, the artificial pancreas uses a sensor and a complex algorithm to determine your glycemic index and commands the insulin pump to add insulin as necessary continuously. And this is a developing technology and is gaining ground as more research refines the algorithm to mimic a real pancreas as best as possible. The picture below is a developing model with the sensor on the left and the pump on the right. The sensor uses bodily fluids circulating through its system to sense the amount of blood sugar and sends this information to the pump, which is how the pump will know when to inject insulin at what amounts. So really all of this is good news as we continue to grow up. Our generation in particular continues to grow up. We'll see more and more developments in treating diabetes. Maybe someday the artificial pancreas will be a norm and perhaps diabetes will be a thing of the past. Here are some references that I used to create this presentation. It has greatly aided me in finding out in particular what treatment options there are available. I hope you enjoyed this presentation and learned about why sweets are sour for diabetics. Goodbye.